Hi and welcome to another furniture flip video. This is a piece that I picked up at my local thrift store, and it's an absolutely solid piece which I really love, but I felt it was a little bit old-fashioned, so I attempted to spruce it up and make it a little bit more modern. I painted it in an inexpensive paint brand that I hadn't used for furniture before, and I finished it. It took actually 3 coats of paint to get it to where I was happy with the coverage. I went away on vacation and came back and I looked at it and I thought, you know what, the colour just does not suit the piece. So I actually did something I just don't like doing, which is repainting something that I've already finished. And I rarely do that, but this was definitely a case to do that. So I took out Annie Sloan paints and the coverage was night and day. I forgot just how lovely Annie Sloan paints are to work with. So if you haven't tried her paints, then definitely give them a try. They are on the more expensive side, but I can't tell you, the coverage is wonderful. The colors are highly pigmented and the coverage is beautiful. So I hope you like the video. I will insert a picture of the prior color of the piece, and I'll be interested to know your thoughts about how that color compares with the color I actually ended up with Annie Sloan. So I hope you like the piece. Take care and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye. So this is a picture of the piece that has just been cleaned and the hardware taken off, and this is the piece with the initial paint color that I chose that I was not happy with. So I decided that the piece needed some detail on both sides. You can see from the front of the piece it's very ornate, it's beautiful, but the sides of it just seemed to me to need just a little bit of something to tie in with the front. So I'm using an IOD mold here in the large flourish and my Das air dry clay. I add a little bit of cornstarch or corn flour to the mold to prevent the clay from sticking. Here I'm just using a credit card or an old gift card to smooth out the clay inside the mold. I find it so much easier for me to do this rather than just use my fingers and hope for a smooth surface at the end. Obviously this outer edge that you see me smoothing is the side that you will adhere to the piece of furniture that you're working on, so it really does have to be very smooth, and a credit card or a gift card enables me to get that very smooth finish that I'm looking for. I'm warming the clay in my hands here. If it's been in a cool place, it definitely helps it move a little easier if you can warm it up a little. So leave it to warm up to room temperature, or just warm it up in your hands and then start smoothing it out. It just helps it to move. I'm just taking very carefully each piece out of the mold. You have to tease it out sometimes in order to prevent it from breaking, but just gently remove each piece and lay it on a flat surface. You can also just pop this whole piece in the freezer for 10 minutes or so, and that helps the clay to remove quite easily also. I've done that many times, but I just chose not to do it here. So when you've removed each piece from the mold, I'm not a fan. I guess it's not that I'm not a fan, but generally speaking, I don't want my molds to crack. Now that does lend a great character to some pieces, but it's not generally the kind of finish that I look for. So I like the molds to be completely free of any cracks, and a damp paper towel over the mold really helps to prevent any cracking whatsoever. And I will come back and give it another spritz of water and just leave it until the clay is completely dry before I start to even work with the molds. Here I've decided to start painting the piece in an Annie Sloan colour. The coverage is just beautiful. Like I said earlier, I just forgot how wonderful this paint is to work with. it goes on very smoothly. I'm using a Klingon, I think it's a Shorty S50 brush here, and it just works the paint really easily. There's no effort involved in this whatsoever. This blue colour is Annie Sloan Aubusson Blue. I'm taking care just to get into every little crack and crevice, because I don't want any of that initial grey paint to show through. Here you can see on the side that I've added the moulds. I just used general wood glue, easy to apply, the same as on the other side of course. Very easy to apply, just make sure the glue has dried overnight before you start painting. Again, making sure that paint gets into every crevice. I don't want any of that grey to show through. Actually, whilst you're adding any moulds with glue, make sure that you smooth out any extra glue that might seep out from the underside of the mould, because you can actually see that it leaves sort of a little lip next to the mould, and you really don't want that to be visible on your finished piece. You may notice here that I actually use little empty mushroom containers to put my paint in when I do paint. Really, any small plastic container works for me, but we eat a lot of mushrooms, I guess, so I always have quite an abundance of these around, so I seem to use them most often. All of my paintbrushes fit into the opening, so that you can even wash them out and use them again if you choose. Onto the top, I'm giving this a light spritz just because it's a larger area to cover. I don't want my paint to start drying out before I can finish the whole top surface, so I gave it a little spritz, very light spritz of water, and it just helps the paint move so much easier. You can even spritz the paintbrush too. I've seen people spritz the paintbrush with water just to help the paint move. Once you've finished a section, make sure you go back with very long strokes side to side on large areas, otherwise you will see where your brush finishes and starts again. in case you're wondering why I'm actually painting the top surface of this piece when the wood did look as if it was in decent condition, it actually was not. So I decided rather to go through a whole lot of effort in making the wood look as well as I could possibly do, which does take a lot of time and effort. Then I decided to just paint it. Here I'm highlighting some of those mould pieces with Annie Sloan Provence. I think these two colours, the Aubusson Blue and Provence, work unbelievably well together, and I wanted to bring out the detail of this piece. I did not want everything just to look very dark and sombre. So I wanted to bring out these beautiful mould details, and I'm using the dry brush technique, which really is an extremely dry brush. You just dab your paintbrush into the most minute section of paint and just gently flick the brush over the surface to release some of that highlight paint. You can always go back and add more highlights, but it's more difficult to actually correct a mistake with your initial darker colour. So just take it very slowly and use it, like I said, a very dry brush, and go back and forth until you get the desired look that you're going for. I also decided to add a little highlight to the drawers of this piece. So I have my little mushroom containers again, one with the Annie Sloan Aubusson Blue and the other one with Provence, and I've spritzed the drawer with a little water because I want to blend a little of the Provence in on the drawer fronts, just to give it a very small hint of a highlight. And now this looks like an awful lot of paint, but it truly is not. I've spritzed the piece with water, so it's making a small amount of paint move over a large area. So it's quite a simple technique, but if it's not looking the way you want, then just make sure that you have two brushes, one for each colour, and then you can touch up going between the darker and the lighter colours to get the shading that you're looking for. This was such a small area to work with, it really did not take much blending and shading at all. I just think it adds a lovely little detail to the final piece. If the paint begins to drag a little rather than add more paint, just keep working what you have until you get the great blending finish that you're looking for. Again, make sure you have lovely long strokes once you've finished. This is the highlighting of the front area, of course. As before, a very dry brush. Work up the lighter colour over the top. Don't go in with a heavy hand. That, as I said, that's very difficult to correct. So a light touch is all you need here, and very, very little paint. I'm speeding this up for you because even though I know I love to watch paint dry, I'm not sure everybody else does. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I'm now finishing the top with wax. I didn't have any Annie Sloan clear wax, otherwise I would have used that, but this is by a brand called Howard. It's called Citrus Shield Premium Paste Wax, and I have a Paint Pixie wax brush that I actually also use for stenciling, and it works fantastically well for that. But this wax applies so easily. It's very greasy and therefore moves extremely well on the piece. And I believe it leaves a very durable finish, but it's going on so nicely over this piece. The instructions are to leave it on, I think, for 20 minutes or so, and then come back and buff off. So I have this wax over the entire piece. I did a couple of coats to make sure it's fully covered and fully sealed. And again, make sure you've got long strokes once you've finished waxing. I decided the sides needed a little bit of extra detail, so I decided to use some Annie Sloan black wax in two very small areas on either side of this piece. It just adds a very, very little detail, something extra, and I think it worked out beautifully. Let me know what you think. If you use a coloured wax, make sure you clear wax before, by the way. It's the final piece. New hardware. I think it turned out very nicely. Updated it and now more usable. Hope you liked the video. Let me know. Thanks. Bye.